Welcome to Power Talks with Santosa. Today we have with us a special guest, Mr. Salil Shetty, the Director of United Nations Millennium Campaign. The goal of the UN Millennium Development Goal is to end poverty by 2015, which is quite an ambitious challenge. Mr. Shetty, at the time when the world is talking about how global economic crisis is going to affect development plans and the manifestation of MDG, we'd like to hear from you something new on this that the world hasn't heard so far.
You know, as far as poor people are concerned, I mean, if you take the people who are living in extreme poverty in Nepal, or indeed in most developing countries and poor countries, I think they'll even find it hard to understand what the financial crisis really means, because they are in a perpetual crisis. You know, so if you're living in the US and, you know, let's say that instead of having 2 cars, you're going to have to live with only 1 car, you know. But for poor people, you know, who are not sure where their next meal is coming from, their life is a crisis. So I think, you know, that's what I always say, because financial crisis, we need to put it in perspective. You know, whose crisis is it? And there is no doubt that I think, if anything, the problem which was caused by some of the richest people in the richest countries is now going to affect, and the consequences of which are going to be felt by some of the poorest people in the poorest countries. So, you know, it's another manifestation of global injustice.
So in a way, it doesn't directly affect the poor people, the poor population around the world.
You know, it's early days, and we are starting to see the impacts. But I think, particularly in a country like Nepal or Philippines or Bangladesh, for example, where remittances are a very important part of the economy, there is no doubt that it will affect much more directly. But also those countries who are dependent on export incomes, you know, anything which is linked to the Western economies are the ones which are going to be hit most quickly. And the transmission mechanisms of the crisis are diverse. You know, and there's also other issues, like many poor countries are unable to get the sort of credit which they need, just trade credit. You know, those are being squeezed. And although those don't have an immediate and direct impact on the lives of poor people, they have a ripple effect.
If the UN has to eliminate poverty by 2015 or later, will this crisis affect the goal?
We're pretty sure it will affect. What we don't know is exactly and in what shape. I mean, if you look at crises like this which have happened in the past, even the 70s, etc., we have found that it actually ends up in a greater number of children dying, and child mortality goes up, kids tend to drop out of school because family incomes are affected. So, you know, it has a kind of a myriad effect, a multiplier effect in so many different ways. It's hard to predict exactly what happens, but I mean, you've seen the numbers which have come out from, say, the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. The number of hungry people has already gone up. Over 1 billion people now are living in hunger. So about 150 million people more are going to be living pushed below the poverty line according to World Bank figures. So we have some numbers, but you know, the details of how it's going to affect are hard to predict. So
how do you envision to deal with this economic deficit or any future financial crisis?
Well, you know, the issue about the Millennium Development Goals and the external financing for the goals, which is likely to be affected, because, you know, we are a bit nervous that rich countries, because of their own financial difficulties, will not deliver on their aid commitments for the achievement of the goals. Now, of course, basically we have 2 types of countries. Countries who are serious about these goals, who are serious about their commitments. And they have always been serious, they continue to be serious, like the Nordics and the Dutch and the British, you know, some of these are the good guys in a sense. And they have delivered when they had good times. They are delivering, I think they are likely to deliver even during bad times. Now, some of the others who are already starting to make noises saying, you know, we can't deliver on the commitments, frankly, they were not delivering even when they had boom times. You know. So they can't use the financial crisis as an excuse to not keep their commitments, because we have to realize that, first of all, none of them are anywhere, the bigger countries, the G8 countries, nobody is close to the 0.7% of gross national income which they had committed many years ago towards overseas development assistance or aid. So that's in the first place. So we're talking about peanuts, you know, like the amount of money we're talking about. If you look at the amount of money that's been given out as bailouts in this financial crisis, you know, I think it's estimated to be in the order of something like $18 trillion or so. And if you add up the entire aid that's been given from rich countries to poor countries over the last 49 years, since aid, in a sense, became something which is accepted as part of the international support process, All of that adds up to, not more than, I think we calculated it to be something like $50 billion, all of that put together. So we're talking about, not 50 billion, I think it was $2 trillion. Yeah, that's right. So it's about the factor of almost 10, between cumulative aid contributions and what has been found for financial bailouts in the space of just 2 years. So we have to put it in perspective. We always say that it's not really a financial issue, it's an issue of political will. If these governments want to support, they can find a way to support it.
When the MDG was incepted in 2000, the leaders of all these developed countries had committed that they will support the alleviation of the poverty. It seems that you're not happy with their promises because they didn't keep it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the promises which have been made have been, the beauty of the Millennium Development Goals is that it is a global compact. So the rich countries committed on Goal 8, which is not just about aid volume, but also aid quality, because we have big problems on the quality side as well. Because it's not just a matter of how much money they give, it's what kind of conditionalities are attached, how much policy space is available for developing countries, how much of it goes back to their own country, so there are all of those factors. But there's also the debt cancellation, and we've seen some progress, but there's still some way to go. And finally, the trade part of the Goal 8. The trade talks have been deadlocked for a long time now. The Doha round didn't go anywhere. So they have not met their commitments on several counts. And I must say there's some who have, and we have to celebrate and to honor them. But there are others who are missing on their commitments. But the Global Compact was not just about the commitment from rich countries. The primary responsibility is with the governments of poor countries, because ultimately the issues of the Millennium Development Goals, which are so basic, meeting the basic needs of people, that is primarily a problem which is being faced by citizens of poor countries. So governments of poor countries have to take primary responsibility, and many of them have not kept their promises either. So it's both sides, are culpable.
So besides lack of fund, are there any other factors or major factors that affects the progress of MDG goals?
No, in fact, in my view, we should not give too much attention on the question of external financing, because that, of course, is important for poor countries. But first and foremost, the question is how much of our own domestic resources we are applying towards the achievement of the goals. And increasingly, the problem is not even about whether we have allocated money in the budget. I know Nepal has had a budget recently, and the money is allocated. The problem in most developing countries is that even after the money is allocated, it doesn't reach the people. So there's a big issue, you call it whatever you want, of governance, of accountability, of corruption, of mismanagement, of inefficiency, so all of those factors. So some countries we don't have the right policies, some places we don't allocate the right resources, but almost in all countries the money doesn't reach the people because of system failures.
Since the initiation of MDG in 2000, how far have you progressed in terms of poverty alleviation?
Well, the latest report from the United Nations Secretary General has just come out, in fact just 2 weeks ago, which gives the 2009 updated progress. And in fact, I must say, when these goals were signed on, I was not in this job. I used to work for an NGO, and I was one of the people who was a bit skeptical about them. Because, these things, our leaders meet, they make all these promises. Every year at the UN there's some conference, and I was very skeptical about it, as I think most people on the street would be. But if you take stock of where we are today, 9 years since the goals were signed, I would say that the progress has been surprisingly good, particularly if you take income poverty. I think there's been quite big progress. Education, 40 million more children are in school. We've saved at least 2 million lives of children under the age of 5. And all of this has happened, because of the concerted focus on these goals and a deadline of 2015 that we have to meet these goals, we have to hit these targets by then. Having said that, there are still many challenges, and there are many countries in the world who are not on track to achieving all the goals. But progress has been quite significant.
We'll continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us.